This is Crystal Salamutu, Senior Talent Partner at Rubrik and a member of this year's WT2 Emerging Leadership Committee. Today, I am honored to present two amazing women in the industry. Our first speaker, Natalie Bonifede, is a diversity and inclusion leader with over 12 years of experience working at the intersection of technology and social impact. Over the course of her career at Girls Who Code, Adobe, Pivotal, and VMware, Natalie has worked to level the playing field at all stages of the technology talent pipeline, including increasing access to K-12 STEM education, growing the pipeline of students majoring in computer science, recruiting and developing top talent in the industry, and partnering with leadership teams to drive equity from the top down. Natalie is currently a people and culture consultant working with clients to create stronger and more equitable businesses. And today, she's here to talk about how and why we rise. We're framing the why to harness sponsorship for yourself and others. Everyone, please welcome Natalie Bonifede.
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm going to just go ahead and jump in. If I could just get a thumbs up from somebody that you all can see my screen. Yeah, are we good to go? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how and why we rise, which is the theme of my talk today, but specifically talking about the why we want to harness sponsorship, not only for ourselves, but also for others. And so thank you for joining. I know that everybody's got a lot going on and I appreciate you being here for this session specifically. I'm happy to have you. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into the agenda. Today is really going to be about exploring new perspectives for how and why to find sponsorship. Some of the things we're going to be going over today are not revolutionary necessarily, but it's a really good reminder that we can basically take some learnings from the program that I ran, which we'll talk about, in order to harness sponsorship for both yourself and for others. The slides are going to have a lot of resources on them. Just know that if you go to that bit.ly URL and put in your email address, I will send you a roundup of everything. So don't worry about having to take notes during the presentation. So we'll go over goals and approach to the content, talk very quickly about the sponsorship program itself. We'll go over some common obstacles that women particularly face as it relates to sponsorship and seeking sponsorship in the workplace. And then I'll be sharing some tactics and some perspectives for you to experiment with to see if they can help unblock you in some of these areas. And then of course, we'll have time for Q&A. We might be doing Q&A at the end of both presentations that are going to be going on, but either way, you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions. So the approach that I take to a lot of workplace challenges is that we cannot fully eliminate the obstacles that we're going to be coming up against, but we can learn how to better navigate them. A lot of this stuff are things that I wish I had known and that I have seen people struggling with all of the time. And for me, this is a constant learning journey in order to basically test things out, try things on, and see what will work for you. And so take what is helpful in this presentation, leave the rest behind. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to professional development, which is why it is so hard. So also keep in mind, like everybody's circumstances are different. You all have different goals. So tune into what makes sense for you. And then also remember that a lot of this is simply for consideration and for experimentation. You don't need to commit to anything sweeping at the end of this presentation. Okay, so Crystal gave me a fantastic introduction. Thank you, Crystal. But essentially what I want to share is that I've had a lot of experience with people and culture at all stages of the tech talent pipeline, and I've had a lot of experience working to level the playing field at all different places. And so here's a little bit about me, but specifically why I'm here today is to talk to you about an executive sponsorship program that I built during my time as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Pivotal. So I have had personal one-on-one experiences with sponsorship relating to my career, but specifically for this, I want to talk about a little bit of a zoomed out approach because I was fortunate enough to have a program built around this such that I could see themes across geographies, across different levels, across different teams. And I want to share those learnings with you today. So as you might imagine, the mission of the program is really to provide sponsorship to high-performing, underrepresented employees in order to retain top talent and diversify leadership teams. But our vision for the company was really so that all deserving employees had equal access to sponsorship. I know we've been talking a lot about sponsorship today, and as you might imagine, not all groups have equal access to sponsorship. And so that was the long-term vision of the program. If you're interested in learning more about the program, you can let me know in that feedback form. But today I just wanted to give you really broad strokes so that we could talk about the context of where these learnings are coming from. And so now that the program is over, what I am really interested in doing is sharing these learnings and sort of helping other people replicate these benefits outside of the context of a program. Not everybody, in fact, 99% of people are not going to be in a sponsorship program. They're simply going to be looking for sponsorship or trying to sponsor others. And so that's what I'm here today to talk to you about. And one of the most surprising things for me was that the far-reaching benefits of sponsorship go way beyond the individual and the people in that one-on-one relationship. There are very important individual benefits coming out of sponsorship, which you're probably well aware of. There's also team and peer benefits, and also benefits for the company and for the industry as well. So really quickly, I think most of you know this, but it bears repeating. So what exactly is sponsorship? In order to claim the title of a sponsor, a senior leader needs to actively advocate for their protege. And really what this means is believing and going out on a limb for your protege and using your organizational capital to support this person's advancement. So this tends to happen, unfortunately, with people who are alike, right? So because leadership teams are very heavily white and male, it's very natural for those people to want to sponsor somebody that is either within their own gender or within their own race. And this is where we sort of come up against the systemic obstacles around women and underrepresented groups in technology, not necessarily having equal access to executive sponsorship. The problem with that is that women specifically tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored. So mentorship is a fantastic thing. You can read a little bit about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship in that grid below. The problem is that mentorship does not typically equal promotion or career advancement. And so you can have all the mentors in the world, but if you're not actually getting what you want out of it, it doesn't help. And in fact, it can almost hurt sometimes if you're being over-mentored and sort of bogged down with relationships that aren't getting you where you want to go. So we need to prioritize sponsorship for ourselves and for others. And I loved this quote. It really resonated with me personally, which is that I'm going to be mentored to death before I'm ever promoted. And so this is why we're really focusing on sponsorship today. Sponsorship can be a really powerful tool for individuals. I'm mostly talking about sponsorship today in the context and for the perspective of the protege. So a lot of the stuff today can also be applicable to if you're a member of leadership who's looking to sponsor somebody. But what I want to be really clear about is that proteges can use sponsorship to get what they need from a career perspective for themselves and for others. But what I'm not suggesting is that you are responsible for changing your company, for always thinking about the collective, etc. There's a very real responsibility that leadership has in order to change the sort of systemic issues inside of a company from the top down. So I just wanted to make that distinction before moving on. Okay, so I would like you all to answer a prompt. So if you could grab either a piece of paper, a sticky note, or something to write with. Take 30 seconds and write your own answer to this. One obstacle that holds me back from proactively pursuing my career development is blank because of blank. This does not have to be sort of the biggest obstacle. Just think of something that really resonates with you. This is going to be for you only, so you're not going to be having to share this out with anybody if you don't want to. So I'll put 30 seconds on the clock. Please write something down. Okay, we're going to be revisiting this later on, so think about this and keep it top of mind as we're going through the rest of the content. Okay, some findings and perspectives coming out of the program. So one very common obstacle is that finding a sponsor can sometimes feel selfish or feel like a shameless act of self-promotion. It can feel icky in some of the same ways that like networking feels icky. So if you hear yourself saying things like, I dread networking, or I don't like talking about myself, or my work will just speak for itself, this might be a helpful sort of reframing for you. So if you're struggling with these things, an underlying perspective or belief that might be driving and not allowing you to push forward through those obstacles is that sponsorship is fundamentally about promoting yourself to an executive in order to get a promotion or career advancement. So if that is your goal, and if that is a helpful belief for you, that's a very legitimate reason to go find sponsorship. However, if it is not, it might be helpful to think about how sponsorship has a lot of far-reaching benefits that are beyond the bounds of the one-on-one, right? So if a sponsor is helping to lift you up, they can also help you lift up your peers and help to elevate systemic and company-wide issues that might be holding others back. This is a really important thing because all of a sudden now you have a voice, you have an advocate as an executive in the company in order to sort of drive broader change within a company. One of the things that we learned from the program is that pairing executives with underrepresented groups and women in the company for a sponsorship relationship allowed them to have a different understanding of the systemic biases that happen in the workplace. And so even if these things are sort of known or they're more of a concept, this really brought it home for both sponsors and proteges. So I have a few quotes here, but I think some of the interesting thing is that executives were able to have a new vocabulary around what was going on throughout the company and sort of what their new responsibility was. And it was also clear that sponsors not only decided to sponsor, the person that they were paired with, but they also learned about things like micro sponsorship, which again, allowed them to sort of broaden their reach and sponsor other people because of this. On the protege side, something that was raised a number of times as being really impactful was the idea of profile raising. So not only can this person sort of raise their own profile within the organization, but now they have the tools and the access to an executive to actively raise other people's profiles as well, which can be, obviously incredibly beneficial for not only you, but for people on your team. And so if this is something that you're struggling with, try starting with your why and get really clear on why you're seeking sponsorship. If the reasoning of like, I want to get a promotion is not able to get you over the hump, think about framing your why so that it helps you see the bigger picture and take into consideration things around you. It's really easy to just jump in and start with the what and the how and the who's going to sponsor me. Those tend to be the easier things to work through, but they're not going to sustain you and help you push through these obstacles when things get really challenging. So start with the why. And if you need help doing that, there's some great resources by Simon Sinek. And then this article here called If You Don't Have a Career Sponsor, Here's How to Attract One. One thing that I want to point out about the second resource is that it's super important that you're participating in behaviors to actually bring sponsorship to you. So highly recommend the second article. Okay, obstacle number 2. This is a huge one. This is one that I see all over the place. It really doesn't matter what team you're on, what level you're at, but the feeling of really struggling with imposter syndrome. So for those of you who aren't familiar, imposter syndrome is that feeling like you feel like you might be a fraud or that you have to be perfect or better than the person next to you. Symptoms include like working too much, perfectionist tendencies, etc. So if you've ever said things like, I don't feel like I deserve sponsorship right now, or I'm worrying about wasting an executive's time, or I want to get sponsorship, but I feel like I need to do more before I'm able to do that, this could be a helpful reframing for you. So an underlying belief that might be getting you stuck and not being able to move or navigate beyond the imposter syndrome is feeling like you should be getting over it. I hear a lot of people talk about, I'm a mid-level career professional, or I'm a senior career professional, and I'm still not able to get over this. Or alternatively, you know, once I reach the next level, then I'll feel confident enough to go after the things that I want. Something that we learned in the program is that it is okay to struggle with imposter syndrome. Everybody has it, and specifically, it's not your quote unquote fault, right? And so you're already struggling with it. You don't need to add the additional blame of feeling like you shouldn't be struggling with it because you can do better or have more confidence or whatever it is. Imposter syndrome is a very rational and learned reaction to external cultural programming. So it is not crazy for you to feel this way. In fact, it's completely rational for you to feel like this. And so instead of trying to get rid of it, I recommend focusing on building resilience and tools to sort of externalize what is going on rather than looking internally for ways to sort of fix what you're struggling with. Through our monitoring and evaluation research, we found that 100% of proteges exhibited symptoms of imposter syndrome, which was pretty surprising. And a lot of proteges felt that by being connected to an executive, they could sort of demystify and humanize who executives were, and they could see themselves in their shoes. And so one of the proteges said something to the effect of, you know, now that I can see that everybody sort of struggles with this, including my C-level sponsor, I can actually understand that I could do this now as well. And so having that relationship can just break down a lot of barriers and allow you to see that not everybody feels incredibly confident, not everybody knows what's going on. I feel like this is something that I tend to think about the more advanced I get in my own career, which is that everybody's just doing the best that they can. So if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, which I imagine many of you are, try to learn about the ways that external and systematic obstacles come into the workplace, right? So really specifically, what cultural programming have you been taught, and how does that make you feel, and how do you understand yourself because of that? What specifically have you been reacting to? Embrace a growth mindset. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with Carol Dweck's work, but try to change your relationship to imposter syndrome, and don't try to get rid of it necessarily. Focus on how you can build resilience as a tool to really help you bounce back from when you really feel this overwhelming feeling inside of you. Resilience is something that can be absolutely developed and amplified and built within you. It is not a fixed trait. And so there's some resources below to really think about how do you build resilience in the workplace, and how do you identify lessons, specifically when things aren't going right, that will allow you to have better outcomes next time, but without the sort of self-blame or self-deprecation cycle that we can find ourselves in sometimes. Okay, obstacle number 3. I don't know how to prioritize my career development if I don't know what I want to do now or in the future. So if you find yourself saying things like, I'm interested in a lot of career paths, or I want to do a lot of things, or I have no idea what I want to do with my career, or if you've ever thought about these things, this could be helpful for you. A perspective that might be underlying that and getting you stuck in this feeling that you feel like you have to know is that, you know, once you figure out what your career is, then you can sort of backwards engineer a plan in order to get there. And so this is called the sort of true self model. You're searching for your true self. And then once you figure what that is, then you can sort of go back and put a plan together around this. And so this is a super common perspective because a lot of sort of HR models and professional development books and tools and plans, they ascribe to this model. And so it's very natural that you would as well. This is typically how we think about career advancement. But we have found that a more helpful way to think about this is to think about the different possible paths and the different possible selves that you would like to explore, right? In the same way that some people think that like there's not one person on the planet for them, there could be many. This is a really similar perspective to that. So think about what you would like to explore and put a plan around exploring that, as opposed to thinking about, you know, I have to know the job title, I have to know the company, I have to know the role, and then having to backwards engineer from that. In terms of learnings from the programs, this one was the most surprising to me. It did not matter the tenure or seniority of the protege. Most every single person in the program really struggled to fill out a professional development plan because they felt incredibly stuck. And this is because the plans that we were giving to employees at the time were very much built around that initial true self model. And so once we said, forget about the plan, forget about the template, really just think about what are the areas in which you'd like to experiment and test, it completely freed people up to sort of think about different, more nuanced, and even more creative opportunities that they might be able to take, instead of sort of feeling like they had to zero in on a very specific job or title. And as you can see here, a lot of the proteges really came to the realization that, you know, there isn't this like perfectly organized linear process for getting into leadership. The path is very crooked, and like, you know, looking back, you can sort of see the path and have it make sense. But while you're going through it, a lot of leadership doesn't even understand how they got there or why they got there, and they didn't even necessarily intend to. And so if this is something that you're struggling with, stop looking for answers using introspection, right? You can't think your way to knowing more about what you might like to do. So using testing and experimentation to look externally about what might be interesting you. Applying agile principles to your own career development. So we all have a ton of tools in our toolkit, specifically about how we, you know, might approach our work. We might approach project management, we might approach software development, etc. Try using those tools that you know work, but on yourself. And so one of those is like, try to test as many new possible identities as you possibly can, in order to sort of explore, see what you like. You might be super surprised by stuff. It might validate what you already know, but try to start testing things in different ways. And if you're asking yourself the question, what do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be in 10 years? What kind of career I want to have? If that's working for you, that's fantastic. But if those questions are paralyzing you, try to ask yourself questions like, who would I like to meet? Or what skills would I like to learn more about? Those sort of smaller and more immediate questions will allow you to gain exposure to a lot of different things and sort of take this like looming pressure above you that you have to know exactly what you want to do. Okay, obstacle number 4 that we have seen is that I don't have time or permission from insert manager, team, sponsor, whatever, to prioritize my own professional development. So if you say things and you think things like, my job takes up 110% of my time, there's no way I have time for this, or my manager doesn't really support me or help me prioritize, or maybe you do want to prioritize, but it seems to always fall to the bottom of your priority list, which is incredibly common. This hopefully will be a helpful perspective shift for you. So sometimes the underlying belief that is getting you stuck here is that a good manager will help you drive and guide your professional development. And without the sort of leadership from your manager, you're not going to be able to prioritize that yourself. Or alternatively, maybe your job is too demanding. Those things might actually be true, and that's totally fine, but those aren't going to help you get unstuck. And so a helpful reframing of that is that you are really in the driver's seat for your own professional development and for your career. And so think of yourself as the pilot and think of your manager as the co-pilot or your sponsor. And also remember that you're entitled to take the time to do this for yourself, and that nobody's actually going to give you permission to do that, or they might not. And so you need to give yourself permission to do that, and you don't need to actually ask for that. You can actually just go ahead and step into that and make time and space for this, because nobody else is going to do it for you. So we found in the program that a lot of the proteges were finding it difficult to find time, and they found themselves oftentimes stuck in what we call office housekeeping work, or doing a lot of emotional labor on their teams. The problem with this is that that is the type of work that does not bring you visibility, it does not help you advance towards your career goals, and it's really just a time suck, right? And so through this program, people were sort of able to give themselves license to sort of say no, carve time away, and start thinking about the work that would be, you know, stretch assignments, profile raising work that was really stretching them to do the sort of interesting and important work on their teams. So if you're struggling with this, the number one thing I recommend to people is building your skills around managing up. There's a lot of great managers out there. There's a lot of inexperienced managers, sponsors as well. You need to help them manage you and help you achieve your goals effectively. And that really is your responsibility. This is a skill that, like, doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, you can always be doing it better. So really think about, like, are you helping them help you? And what about your approach can change so that they can do that better? Also take a critical look about how you spend your time. For me specifically, I know that it's personally really easy for me to just keep my head down, keep sort of churning through the work instead of picking my head up and really looking and mapping out, okay, where am I spending my time throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month? And really take a look at, are you spending a lot of time managing your team's emotions? Are you doing that office housework? And is it too much or not enough? And there's no right answer to what is too much or not enough of that. But think about if that is helping you get to your goals and doing the work that you want to be doing. So of course, what goes on with that is learning how to say no. Unfortunately, a lot of work that doesn't actually help you achieve your goals tends to be put onto women and underrepresented groups. Whether that is like explicit or implicit, it tends to happen. So really get comfortable saying no and saying why you're saying no. And then of course, there is some invisible work that should be made visible. So not all of the work that you're going to be doing is high profile or glamorous or, you know, super splashy. And that's totally fine. That's not necessarily what we're going after. And so the important work that is invisible, help make it visible by talking to your sponsor and your leadership teams about it. Okay, so we're going to go back and revisit the obstacle that you wrote down originally. And I want you to think about this new prompt. So take a few minutes to write this down and your answers to this specifically. So a new perspective or tactic that I will test to overcome my obstacle is blank. And a first next step that I'd like to take in order to do this is blank by blank date. And something to keep in mind is that this first step does not have to be big. It can be something as small as putting a reminder in your calendar, buying one of these books on Amazon, doing whatever you need to do, but really take the time to actually make it explicit and put a date as to when you want to do this by. And so if you would like to, you can actually go to that bit.ly link, as I mentioned in the beginning, and share what your sort of obstacles and your takeaways are from this session for me. That would be incredibly helpful for me to understand what you all are sort of struggling with and what you found most helpful and not helpful. And you can connect with me at nataliebonifede.com. And then I really hope that everybody can use this time to approach things differently. I know that there's a lot going on right now, and things tend to be more challenging, but this could also be a really good time for experimenting with some new approaches. So thank you all for joining. I want to give a special thanks to the conference organizers. I know there was a lot of work making this from an in-person talk to a virtual talk. All of you for showing up, and then to Megan Columbus, who helped me with this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. I have a couple of questions for you from our attendees.
Sure, are we going to do them now?
Sure. So first question is, how do you get rid of that feeling that sponsorship is nothing but favoritism?
How do you get rid of the feeling that sponsorship isn't favoritism?
Is nothing but favoritism.
Yeah, so that can be an easy perception to fall into. I think fundamentally realizing that sponsorship is a mutually beneficial relationship is super important, right? And so not only is an executive sort of helping you, right, with your goals, advocating for you, you have a very real responsibility to actually support your sponsor as well, and very tangibly too. And so what does that sponsor need to know about your team that they don't have access to? Sort of what are the perspectives they need to be hearing? How can you be sort of elevating their work and sort of making connections for them? It's really important to realize that this is not like a one-way relationship. It really has to be a two-way street. And sort of that can sort of, I guess, shift the perspective from feeling like this is all about a me thing and somebody doing a bunch of favors for me, as opposed to like, this is a relationship where everybody's going to benefit from.
Great, thank you. Another question is, do you have any tips for exploring if an executive is open to being a sponsor other than asking them?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think what you can do is ask people around them, right? Like talk to people who know your sponsor, talk to people who work on their team, perhaps talk to their HR business partner. There's a lot of ways to sort of get additional data points and information as opposed to like just having that conversation if you find it to be awkward or uncomfortable or a little bit too direct. So I would say like go put some feelers out there in other places and try to find out.
All right, great, thank you. And last question, how do you find sponsors outside of your org?
Outside of your organization. So I'm going to assume that that means your specific team. But if people do mean outside of like your company, I think the tactics are probably pretty similar. So one is put yourself in positions where you're actively networking with other people, that you're actively building relationships with other people, and that you're problem solving, right? So if you're somebody who's known as like, I'm providing a service, I'm not just elevating problems and questions, I'm actually like attracting people to me because of the work that I'm doing, that can be really helpful. You also shouldn't be afraid to like ask for introductions from people that you do know in your organization that you do have really good relationships with that might be willing to introduce you to somebody else.
Great, thanks again, Natalie.
Thank you.
All right. Well, our next speaker is someone close to my heart. Snehal Khandkar is a senior engineering manager and is one of the early engineers who joined Rubrik, whose contributions are pivotal to the company's exponential growth over the last few years. Snehal, whose passion revolves around enabling and empowering women in technology, currently leads the Women in Engineering group at Rubrik. In 2014, she founded her own SaaS edtech company, and early in her career, she worked as a senior software engineer at Cisco. A programmer at heart, she still finds her thrill in building great teams and launching new products. And today, she's here to talk about why leaders don't take permission and how to take charge of your own career growth. Everyone, please welcome my fellow D&I advocate, Snehal Khandkar.
Hey, Crystal. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. That was really nice. And hey, everybody. It's so awesome to meet you virtually. It just blows my mind that I'm sitting in my home and I'm talking to people like across 30 countries. And that's certainly a big kudos to the VMware WT2 team for putting this together. And I know how much effort has gone in making this happen and taking this conference virtual. So thank you, folks. But at a certain level, it also gives me a sense of where our technology is taking us. And isn't that like really cool to think about? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Isn't that like really cool to think about that? Hey, we all have had a part to play in enabling this virtual environment that we are living in. So I wanted to step back and give a little sense of how this talk came to be. About a year or so back, I got together with one of my colleagues, and his name was Dan. And Dan was like one of the very senior engineers. He was a rock star engineer. And Dan was, he had pretty much built out his company's product. He architected it. He was a coding machine. He owned and solved our customer issues. He worked really hard, long hours, and he was like really kicking ass. And just what had happened was that just about a week before, his manager had called him in and he said that, hey, Dan, you are an awesome engineer and we really value your contributions, but you're not really leading. And that is limiting you. And more than that, it is really hurting your team. So you need to either figure out how we are going to work around this leadership challenge, or, maybe you need to make a choice that, hey, you're going to be just an individual contributor and you need to find another lead for your team. I don't know if this sounds like a very familiar thing to any of you, that you think you are like rocking it, you're at the top, you're giving it your all, you're ready to take that next step, that next opportunity. And what you instead get is like a feedback that says, no, you're actually hitting a wall here. You need to step up. You need to demonstrate that, hey, you can be a leader. And then it goes like, wait, so you're telling me that my career is stalled because I'm not being a leader, but you're hiring this other person coming from outside to be a leader? So how do I really lead here if I'm not the leader? How do I prove that I can be a leader? It sounds like a catch-22 situation at some point. So how do we deal with this? At this point, the way I would like to put it is that we have good news and we have bad news. Let's start with the bad news first. And that is this. Yeah. And that is that if you are really waiting for somebody to open up the door to the leadership club, to lay out a welcome mat and let you in and ask you to be a leader, then you are not leading. That is not the attitude that is going to help you prove that you are ready to take on that leadership position. You have to try something else. This is not going to work. So what is going to work? And that's where the good news comes in. The thing is that fundamentally, leadership is about influence and not authority. And let's take a minute to define these terms. Influence is the ability to bring about a change. Authority, on the other hand, is the right to enforce a decision. And good leaders do things by influencing. They influence people, they influence situations, they influence outcomes. They don't do it by dictating things. So why does it matter? Why is that a good news? The reason it's a good news is that anybody can step up and be influential, because influence is something that you earn. It is earned by a lot of hard work for sure, but it is earned. On the other hand, authority is something that you are given. And in most cases, your authority comes from where you sit in that org chart, right? That defines what's the level of your authority. But no matter where you are on that org chart, you can decide to step up today and become more influential. You can actually have a wider impact than where you are sitting in that org chart. So that essentially, if you can get to that, you are realizing that you can be the leader by first principles. So let's see, how do we do that? Fundamentally, if you think about it, being a leader comes down to three things. First is that, hey, leaders are people who identify and solve problems. Yeah, no brainer there, right? I mean, that's what leaders do. Secondly, leaders are people who invest in growing others, which also makes sense, right? Because leadership is almost as much about people that you lead as it is about you. And thirdly, leaders are people who are not afraid of taking risks. Yes, they take thought out risks, they take intelligent risks, but they are fundamentally people who are not afraid of putting themselves out there. Before we get into these three things, there's one thing that I want to say. And that is that these two things in themselves are the ways to expand your impact in your organization. What matters is, are you doing these things authentically? Are you doing these things to improve what your org does or to have a real positive impact? Or are you doing this just for the interest that, hey, somehow this is going to get me to my next promotion? there's a very subtle difference in that motivation, but the first motivation matters a lot. If you are doing it authentically and if you're really having that positive impact, then the second one follows. So keep that kind of in back of your mind when you're approaching these things. And let's start with the first one first. It's about identifying and solving problems. And the way I think is that, identifying problems is a little more important. I mean, it's kind of, if you think of it, made up of two parts. You identify problems and then you get to solve them. But what is really hard is to able to see what is really broken. Are you good at figuring out what is that missing link? What is broken here? And if you can get to that point, then solving process comes very easily. So how do you actually go about doing that? Now, if I ask you, for a minute that, hey, what are the 3 things about your job that irk you, like really irk you? And I know you all are remote and you can't respond to me, but I think if I make an assumption that it's not that hard for you to come up with 3 things that bother you day in and out, I won't be very off in my assumption. There are things it could be very simple. It could be as simple as, oh my God, our code takes forever to build. Like I'm like waiting for two hours to, get response whether my build failed or not. Or it could be something like, oh, that approval process for my marketing plan, that's just like, oh my God, it drives me crazy. It could be really small things, or it could be something really big. But the thing is that in almost every functioning organization, there are problems. These may be product issues, these may be structural challenges, people challenges, or just broken processes. There are always things that crop up and that really drive us crazy. But we as humans are essentially very good adapters. Whenever we see these problems, we are so focused on what we are trying to achieve that we tend to take them in our stride. We always find workarounds our problems. We try to put blinders so that we don't notice the problem, but yet get our task done. So what happens at the end of it is that these problems remain. They irk us every day, but we build our blinders and we keep blowing through the thing. So that's where we need to figure out how we can remove our blinders. So the next time you hit something that you feel really, really irks you, is really bothering you, take a minute and instead of working around it, take a pause and step back. Step back, and this is a thought process that I like to use. Imagine for a moment that you own a lot more than what your current job work is. Imagine that you own the whole project, or imagine that you own the whole organization, the whole shebang. You are responsible for making this happen. If you really broaden your view that way, it helps you to figure out what is, it really helps you to get a perspective on the problem. It helps you to take away your blinders and get a wider view of things. And once you have that view, once you can see things from different perspectives, then ask, hey, what is really broken here? Why are we not able to do better? Why are we taking this in our stride? Can we do better? What would it take to do that? So take that wider view. The next thing is that now you have an inkling of the problem. Our typical instinct is that the moment we see a problem, we like, okay, I see it, let me go and fix it. I know how to do this. I have the solution to this. If I do X, it will fix it. Hold off a little. Before you go into problem solving mode, go talk to people. Go seek out people who have a stakeholder, who are different stakeholders in the problem. Get their viewpoints. Understand what it is that is really blocking things. Understand, hey, are you looking at the symptom of the problem, or are you actually looking at the real problem here? Are you asking the right questions? Have other people tried solving this? What blocked them? What worked? What failed? Is there some process that already exists that could help? Make sure that you actually do this exercise before you jump into problem solving. It can save you a lot of time, and you can actually be sure that you are attacking the right problem here and not just the symptom of a problem. The next step, of course, comes to problem solving. Here again, our instinct sometimes is to, now I have figured out what the problem is, now I'm going to hunker down in my cave and emerge with this glorious solution that is going to solve it all. But try something else for a minute. Step out of your comfort zone and go talk to different people. Talk to people who have a different viewpoint on this. Talk to people who are experts in this area. Talk to people who probably have a completely opposite view of what your solution is. Discuss your ideas with them. You'll get a lot of feedback, you'll get a lot of opposition, you'll get a lot of different viewpoints. Get all those. Try to work through them. Again, work through them very authentically. Your goal here is to actually find a solution that works in most cases. There are two things you do when you start talking to people and when you start getting these perspectives from people. The first thing is that you are going to build a very strong solution because you have really drilled through a lot of use cases, a lot of scenarios, a lot of viewpoints. So that, of course, in itself is a big win. But the second thing is that when you're talking to these people, what you are really doing is you're building a team of stakeholders. These are the people, these people that you have spoken to, whose advice you have gathered, whose viewpoints you have incorporated, are people who actually believe in that problem and who have had a say in the solution and who are a part of the solution now. They are invested in making this happen. And that is the team of stakeholders that will be with you. So go ahead and build that team. There's another a thought exercise that I like to do. In a way, if you think about it, if you can evaluate the time horizon of your solution, you know what is the level of maturity of your leadership. Are you being a leader at a tactical level, or are you being a visionary here? So take some time and keep this in the back of your mind and see where you are operating today. And then stretch yourself, challenge yourself to go to the next level. And please be very kind on yourself. You should remember that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to actually develop your thought process, to build your skills, to go from, let's say operating at a task or operational level to operating at a strategic or visionary level. It takes time to build those skills and to get there. It's not going to happen in a week. It's probably not even going to happen in a month. But keep challenging yourself and building your skills so that you are actually able to think in long term and build solutions that address the core of the problem and are more fundamental in nature. So don't stress yourself by this tool, but just keep it on the back of your mind as an evaluation of how you're progressing on that leadership scale. So now we have done all the hard work, right? You have identified the problem, you have figured out the solutions, you have talked to people, you have a team of stakeholders. The next thing is to step up and own it. And this is really the crux of things, because as you get into the implementation phase, you're going to be faced with a lot of hard decisions. There are going to be compromises. You have to choose between two really not so great choices. There is going to be a cost. There is going to be risk. This is not the time to hesitate from making those decisions. There are going to be hard decisions, but this is really the time when you have to step up, you have to make the decision and own the responsibility for it. Of course, you should, ask for advice, ask for guidance. That is fine, but do not delegate decision-making to somebody else. Do not give that up. Do not be scared of making decisions. Take that call. own that responsibility, own that risk. That is very critical, because that ability to own the responsibility and risk is what really defines a leader. Are you able to take it on you to believe in yourself that, hey, I have done all my homework to the best of my ability, and I'm willing to put what it takes to make this happen, and I'm really ready to take that responsibility. Own it. And once you make that decision, put all your passion, put all your authenticity in making this happen. Drive this, make that implementation happen. Now, the reality of life is that no matter how well thought out the solution is or how well laid out the plan is, not all good plans succeed. There will be failures, there will be challenges. But the way it goes is that if you're operating with passion and authenticity, and if you are really trying your best to deliver it, and if you make it go right more often than wrong, in most cases, you end up making a positive impact. So take that ownership and actually drive it to success to the best of your ability. Up next is growing others. And this actually sounds a little counterintuitive, right? I mean, on one end, you are thinking, hey, I'm struggling to grow in my career. I'm like trying to figure out how to make my jump. But you're asking me, but you're telling me that, hey, invest time in growing others. I mean, am I really even qualified to do that? Should I be doing that if I'm struggling with my own career right now? But if you remember my friend Dan, when he actually got over the harshness of his feedback and he really went back and assimilated it and thought about it, one of the biggest things that he realized was that he was an amazing engineer for sure, no doubt about that. But he realized that, hey, what did my team gain by being with me? Did I really mentor anybody? Did I really enable them? Did they get better by, working with me? Did I anyway enhance their career growth? And at the end of it, he felt that, if you think about it on a leadership chart, that was one of his biggest myths that he never really thought about. See, it's in a way, it's pretty simple, right? To understand why leadership has to be collaborative. I mean, if you want to have an impact that is bigger than what you yourself alone can deliver or can do, you have to scale. You have to build a team. Otherwise, you're going to limit yourself. You're going to limit the impact you can have. The best metaphor I heard about this was in an article by Molly Graham. And the article was titled, Give Away Your Legos. It's an amazing article. And the crux of this metaphor is, it's like, imagine you have built this project and you've really put all your passion and a lot of effort in building this project. And that is very similar to, to like building a big Lego structure, which you just put your vision, it has your signature, your vision, you have everything around it, and you really love this project. And now you have these new people coming in, and they're trying to take parts of your Lego, of your piece. And the reaction to this is not very different from what a child's reaction would be if you asked that child to share their Legos. It's like, hold on. What's going on here? I mean, I know you're trying to come help me, but it's very hard for people to give it up. I mean, they have really questions like, oh, what if these people don't build it the way it is supposed to be built? Or what if they mess up that tower and they really break it up? Or what if they leave out all the good bricks and miss the purpose? Or what if they build something completely different from how it should be built or how I vision should be built? Or the worst of all is, what if they get it wrong? What if they mess up? And these are, if you think about it, really valid emotions that people have when they have to give up working or when they have to relinquish responsibility to somebody else of what they are working on. And these emotions are essentially what make people hold on to things that they are working on and that they cannot give away those responsibilities. But you have to realize that if you really want to grow as a leader, if you want to get on to building bigger and better things, you have to give away what you're working on today. You have to give up that responsibility to somebody else. But there is a very important distinction here. That is that you have to give away your responsibility. It's about giving responsibility. It's not about dumping tasks on somebody. The way you think about it is that you're actually investing time and effort in growing somebody to take over this responsibility and to be successful at it. That you're putting trust in that person. That you're giving them challenges and then you're helping them and guiding them to work through those challenges. You're making them more confident about taking this responsibility and being successful. Because at the end of it, if you have a team that is successful and confident and that feels ownership for your Lego pieces, that is the best method for you to move up to the next thing and to build bigger and better things. And as you build this and as you're building this team, you're already on your way to leadership. So I came across this, I think it's a youth summer camp. And I've never been to this summer camp, but I really liked the name because in a way I felt that it captures the essence of what leadership really means. This is a journey of leadership when you go from a me to a we. If you think about it, as an individual contributor, your job is to optimize and maximize your contribution. And that is really how it should be. That is what your value to the company is. That's your job. But when you become a leader, it's a little different. It's no longer about optimizing what you do or maximizing your effort, but it is really optimizing your team's output, your team's ability to deliver. And so if you think of a leader, your job is now to act as the glue or to act as a filler to ensure that nothing is broken or falling apart, to act as that enabler to ensure that, hey, your team is actually running as a well-oiled machine and they are enabled to deliver the best they can. As a leader, that's the role you're playing. It's not about yourself. It's really about your team as a whole. And when you realize, and when you do that, you realize that, hey, everything that your team achieves, it's really, they play a lion's share in that. Your successes are more about the team. You share that credit with them. They own that credit. And if you're a good leader, you're very comfortable giving that credit to the team. And also, the corollary of that is that you're also very comfortable owning up to the failure and taking responsibility for them. Finally, we come to risk-taking. You have put in a lot of hard work here. You have solved problems, you have built teams. But if you hesitate at taking this final leap, it will be hard for you to extract the full value of your efforts here. Now, in a way, I feel talking about risk-taking is a little funny because if you could actually, if we could actually discuss here and list down all the risks that you would be called to take upon, it wouldn't be much of a risk-taking, right? But keeping that aside, let's maybe go over two important pitfalls or two important points that I wanted to highlight here. The first is that if you have worked through all these, by now you are a rock star in your organization. You are somebody who is not just good at identifying problems and raising them, that itself is important, but you are also good at actually fixing those problems. You have proven that. You are good at implementing, you are good at making things happen. You have actually built teams that function, that work, that are confident, and that have ownership. You've done these two things. You're a rock star. You are going to have people coming to you with opportunities, people who are going to be ready to sponsor you, people who are rooting for you, who want to be with you. So if somebody offers you an opportunity, but you're not 100% sure that you're up to the challenge, say yes. Say yes, shake hands on it, and then figure out how to do it. See, the thing is that if somebody is really giving you the opportunity, what they're essentially saying is they believe in you and they're ready to work with you through this. At that point, if you really wait till you build all the skills and you're completely ready and you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, most likely that opportunity is not going to wait for you. It's gone by. But if at that point you step up and say yes, what you're saying is, hey, I'm ready to step out of my comfort zone. I am ready to take this challenge on. Here is what I can do, and here is where I'm willing to step up and learn and do this. So, and if you really step back and think about this, unless you get into the weeds of things, you really don't know what skills you're going to need or what challenges you're going to hit. And once you get there, no matter how prepared you felt when you started out, you are going to have to figure out your ways around different situations. You have to build skills. You have to deal with situations. So don't deny yourself. If somebody is giving you an opportunity, say yes and figure it out and make it happen. And then finally, by this time, as I said, that you are a rock star in your company. You are somebody who has delivered. Realistically, opportunities should be coming to you. You should be getting sponsors. You should have supporters. You should have people rooting for you. But that's not how real world works all the time. People are very busy with getting their jobs done. And sometimes people forget, or you may be past yours for some opportunities, or it could just be a fact of life that bias exists. It may be unconscious bias, but it may be bias. It's bias nevertheless, right? I mean, there are existing studies that prove that, that at least that assert that women are more likely to be passed over for promotions or for opportunities. So all these things are just a fact of reality. But if you think that you see an opportunity or you see a position and you feel confident that, hey, I'm really suited for that, and that will be really awesome for me, go ask for it. If you think you have done amazingly well and you deserve that promotion, go advocate for yourself. Go ask for things. If you think you should have that salary increase that you deserve, go talk about it. And I'm not trying to trivialize this. Stepping up and asking for things is really hard because you're really putting yourself out there, and it's quite likely that you're going to get a no, and that no hurts your ego at times. It's a hard thing to do. But you should also realize that if you don't ask, you're likely not going to get it anyways. So asking for things, and I mean, if you get a yes, then it's awesome. But if you get a no, there are a few good points there too. You have asked. Your leadership knows that you're looking for more. You have also told them why. They know your accomplishments. They know your achievements. They know where you stand, right? So you are on top of their mind now. And even if you get a no after all that, that no comes with a feedback of why not, right? And that feedback, that why not, is going to be very valuable for you to understand how to forge your path out of here and how to move on to that next level. So always remember that asking, no matter how hard or how uncomfortable it feels, is the best thing that you can do for yourself when you think you deserve it. And finally, I would like to leave you with two thoughts. First is there's this lecture called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. He's a CME professor, and he has this concept of brick wall. It's a lecture on YouTube, so if you haven't watched it, go watch it. But he has this concept of brick walls, and brick wall is something that he defines as every time you hear a no, or it can be done, or hey, this is the result, this won't happen. That's a brick wall stopping you. And he says that, hey, brick walls are really to give us a chance to show how badly we want something. So the next time you get a no, can do, won't happen, these are the rules, this is the reason, remember that and fight through it. Don't take it lying down. And the final thing is that there are going to be challenges, there are going to be compromises. You are going to hit roadblocks, really difficult choices to make. At times it helps if you ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? It won't help you fix all your problems and all your challenges, but what it really helps you do is that it opens up a few options that you weren't aware of before. With that, thank you for listening. And Crystal, over to you. Let me stop here.
Thanks, Snehal. This is great. Yeah, so we have a couple of questions. The first one is, do you have any advice for how to go after problems that have been painful for too long, specifically ones that involve teammates who feel burnt out on trying to solve the problem in the past and fundamentally believe there's no solution possible?
So I think problems are at different levels. And it is either going to be, something that you can solve easily, or it's either going to be something that people have tried to approach before, but failed at doing it. And at that point, what you really need to do is to build a team and to understand what were the failures before. Many times the issue may not be in the solution, but in the implementation of it, or in getting buy-in from different people. So if you feel that somebody has actually tried to address that problem before and has failed, go talk to that person and do this brainstorming exercise of, hey, what do you think it could have, what do you think was our biggest roadblock? And take it from there. I just feel that talking to people and analyzing your failures help you figure out how you can do it better the next time.
Thank you. We have a very interesting question here. How do you ask for a raise during this pandemic time, now that a lot of companies are going out of business and not doing well financially? I almost feel like it's inappropriate, although I think it's fair.
So here's the thing. You know what your value add is. You know what you have done for the company, how much value you have added, and where you are on the pay scale, right? So you know what your value should be, where you are today. I understand that the business is at a certain stage, and there are business challenges, and whether the pay will happen or not is a different thing. But that does not stop you from asking. And asking is not just like, hey, I want a pay raise. It's more about, hey, this is the value that I have added to the company over the last year. These are my contributions. This is my impact. This is what I think a fair compensation looks like for me. And again, going back to the risk taking, there are a couple of things to it. It is possible that given where the business is, the answer is no for today. But at that point, you have certainly let your manager know that you are not happy with where you are. You have let him know or her know what your contribution is and what your expectation is. And with that on the back of their mind, they are going to find out ways to figure out how to compensate you, how to enable you, how to do something so that they can retain you. So that is going to happen. It may take time, but it will happen.
Thanks, Snehal. Well, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending this afternoon session. Thanks, Snehal. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks to our committee, everyone who participated. We really appreciate your presence today.